Welcome to a multitude of counselors. We're so thankful that you've come to our program today. We're going to be talking about tyranny, dictatorship, and mental health. And our guest today is Jaime Jorge. Jaime experienced what very few of us experience, and that is living under a political dictatorship. At the tender age of 9 years old, he was offered by the government, by the communist government, a scholarship to go to Moscow to study music. And he was told he would be given that scholarship on one condition, that he would renounce his faith in God. And at 9 years old, Jaime said, no.
Amen.
I was thinking about the subject matter of today, and I found a wonderful paper online called Tyranny and Mental Health by Riyad Abet. And I want to quote him because he says this so well, and I'm going to read for a little bit here. He says, so we can get kind of an idea of what it's like psychologically to be under a dictatorship. Quote, "It is under totalitarian regimes that the removal of the last vestiges of protection for the individual against the might of the state takes place. Society is re-engineered under the guiding principles of the state ideology, which can be communism, nationalism, fundamentalism, etc. It's not about the philosophy, the ideology, it's about the control. In a process that frequently leads to intense suffering, mass murder, and a variety of mass human rights violations. The totalitarian regime relies on the loneliness of the individual." And I found that so fascinating that it relies on the loneliness of the individual. And then he unpacks it, he says, "A reality that it actively promotes through its policy of atomization of society into isolated, ineffectual individuals, its imposition of a state ideology, and its systematic use of terror. Citizens are systematically deprived of autonomous decision-making and action in whole areas of life. This can result in an impaired sense of personal responsibility and a tendency to blame outside agencies for all negative events." In other words, it affects people's consciences, their ability to take moral responsibility for themselves. Terror is used as a routine instrument of governance and not simply as a deterrent or punishment to the opponents of the regime. The strategies implemented are those familiar to all tyrannies and include abduction, disappearance, confiscation of property, deportation, torture, extrajudicial killings, and a variety of collective punishments. However, the totalitarian state demonstrates a unique ability to carry out such violations on a scale previously unimaginable. Thus, the victims of Nazi Holocaust, the Stalin purges, the Cambodian killing fields involved millions of victims who were not guilty of any conventional crime. And the author goes on to state that these regimes cause the destruction of trust. Society is built on trust. The infrastructure of society is all about people trusting one another. They destroy that trust. There's control of the media and the institutionalization of torture. Well, not surprisingly, there are serious psychiatric ramifications of this repression. Post-traumatic stress, major depressive disorder, anxiety, schizophrenia-like states, sleep disturbance, sexual dysfunction, chronic hyperventilation. I thought that was weird. I don't know what it is. Cognitive impairment akin to pseudo-dementia. And in addition, there are personality changes that have been noticed and are actually talked about in the ICD-10, which is the International Diagnostic Manual for all diseases. And the prominent features of these include symptoms of apathy. You can see why people wouldn't care anymore. They can't affect anything. They can't make any difference. They can't even control their own lives, so they become apathetic. Chronic tiredness, lack of initiative, poor concentration, and paranoid thoughts. We're going to have an awesome discussion today. We have this illustrious panel here. Shelley Wiggins, licensed professional counselor from Michigan. David Guerrero, biblical counselor from Wisconsin. Dr. Nivischi Edwards from Tennessee. I know you're about to move for certain wonderful reasons. And our wonderful guest, Jaime Jorge, or if you say it with the Cuban inflection, it would be Jaime Jorge.
That's right.
Did I say it right?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Right.
But I'll call you Jaime Jorge when I can remember to, because I've been calling you Jaime Jorge for years.
That's okay.
Did you know that? Behind your back. We're so glad you're here, and I'm really excited about this discussion. And I just want to start by asking you, when were you first aware? I know that this was going on when you were a child. When were you first aware that you were living under a repressive government, or did you never know anything else and you thought it was just your normal?
Well, I probably first knew when I started attending school. And one of the very first things that singled you out as a Christian was your Young Communist Party scarf. Everybody that attends school in Cuba has to wear a uniform. And along with that uniform, which was blue, navy blue shirts or pants, white shirt, or burgundy pants or shorts. I think now they use a mustard color as well for your pants or shorts or skirts. Now you wear that scarf, and that is the scarf that lets everybody know that you're a young communist. So if you didn't wear a scarf, you didn't wear it for two reasons. One, because you forgot it at home, which was frowned upon, or you were a Christian and you purposefully did not wear that scarf. So the minute you didn't wear your scarf, and you would line up with hundreds of other kids to pledge the allegiance and to sing the national anthem.
Target.
Exactly right. You could easily be identified from the crowd. So then that's when it would all begin.
So how many in the school and how many didn't wear the scarf?
Hundreds and a handful.
Maybe under 10 kind of thing?
Quite easily. And so you are identified, and your teacher or your principal or other teachers, before you even dismiss to go to class, they'll start coming over. So why aren't you wearing your scarf today? And this was a daily thing. Well, because I'm a Christian. Why are you a Christian?
They interrogated you every day about
I
it.
wouldn't say every day, but very
regularly.
frequently. I mean, I remember it happening many, many times.
So you stood out like a sore thumb.
Exactly, and any Christian young lady or young man would stick out and would immediately go through this. Then you go into class and you come late, and then the students are jeering and wondering and asking and mocking you, and so it becomes and everybody against you feeling, and you start feeling that early on.
And this was set up intentionally?
I think absolutely, because it's all about trying to make sure people conform to what they want. I remember one time, and this is something that made my parents very upset. I felt so accosted that I peed in my pants. So now I can laugh at it now, but you know, from a counselor, a psychological point of view, that's not good apparently. And so when I said that to my mother,
in fact, we all just diagnosed you with enuresis. So
that's it.
Just in our
That's
mind.
it. That's right. One of the many diagnoses I'm sure you're going to have before this
we're having
program is
so much
over.
fun already.
Like the pressure, so the
That's
intensity
right.
of being under that scrutiny. At
And
that
so I
age.
didn't even realize what was going on in other realms, physiologically speaking. And so you go through this every day until, as that paper was saying, you have no individual thought. You have no independence because everything is now starting to be planned out for you on many, many levels.
Basically, to create you to be a robot under their
Regime?
That's correct, to be what they want you to be.
Right.
So I was very fascinated by how he said it depends on they really inculcate the loneliness of the individual, or they make that happen. They make people lonely. Did you have any friends?
I had friends, I had church friends.
Okay.
I had wonderful church friends. But, for instance, my neighborhood kids, or my neighborhood friends were not really my friends. We had a ball field, we lived outside the city.
Yeah.
And so there was a ball field where people played soccer and baseball, two of the main sports that are played in Cuba. And almost every time that I would go, and there was some other Christian friends that lived in that neighborhood, almost every time we would go there and we would say, hey guys, you're about to play soccer or baseball, can we play? Almost always the answer was the same, we don't play with Christians.
Wow.
So even in the neighborhood, kids your age are already sort of singling you out, they're mocking you. They would come and ask us, so, you know, where is God? Tell us where's God. There was a famous cosmonaut, Russian cosmonaut by the name
We
of
just have
Yuri.
no concept of what it's like to live in a world where religion is literally
No.
snuffed out or attempted to be snuffed out by the state. Like, can you imagine? Like,
And that's the aim of communism, is to replace God with that ideology, which is one of the reasons why it is so dangerous.
yeah. So I interrupted you. You want to finish?
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
Getting back to the whole loneliness thing, you go, you want to play with your quote-unquote friends, and they tell you no because you're a Christian. Think about how that would make somebody feel. Well, you'd have to start questioning why you are a Christian. You know what I mean? Well, why
Is it
can't
worth
I
it?
belong?
Right.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And especially as a child, we want
Yes.
to be a part of, we want to belong, we want to be included and
Right.
a part of.
Right.
It's like
whole peer-
bullying on steroids.
Yeah.
We deal
Yeah.
with kids that are dealing with bullying in the schools and are having all kind of ramifications of that. But this is a different level.
On a larger scale.
It's more psychological.
It's an entire
bullying, really,
community.
right?
Yeah.
Was there physical bullying, or was it mostly just psychological?
No, I don't ever remember being physically bullied. But remember, Christians were arrested, they were tortured, they were jailed, and they were killed for
Did
their
you have
faith.
any relatives or know anybody on a close basis that went through that, or?
Well, my dad, who was a pastor, visited a number of members who had been called to do the compulsory army service. And some of those never made it out of the army.
Because they'd be persecuted by
They
the
were
other
persecuted.
soldiers?
They refused to bear arms. They refused to do certain things, and they would be thrown in jail. They would be put in solitary confinement. Solitary confinement is a way to make you
Break down.
break down. Talk about the ultimate loneliness.
Right.
Calculated to do
And
that.
so we did. I didn't know. I was too young. I didn't know people like that, but my father certainly did, and other pastors went through it. In fact, I have noticed something, that in many of the Christian pastors from Cuba that came around the time that my family came, many of them had been diagnosed with dementia, with Alzheimer's, with PTSD, because of the stress and the strain that they went through in standing up for their congregations, in standing up for their families. One year, the government decided to fine all of the churches. It didn't matter the denomination. Every church in Cuba, depending on the size of the church, was fined a certain amount of money. And if you didn't come up with that money, they would close down that church.
Wow.
And so everybody would sell their
Sacrifice.
toys. They
Yeah.
would,
Big
kids sold
sacrifices.
toys. The parents would sell furniture, this and that, to come up with the money to pay the fine.
Did your parents find ways of compensating for this sort of institutionalized loneliness that was going on and all of the ostracization that you were going through as a kid in school? Did they step in and like create fellowship in some other form for you, warmth in the family circle, church, what did you do to kind of compensate?
Well, I remember us having things like family worship
Yeah.
every day.
Yeah.
Our family worships were hours long in the morning. My mom, my sister, and I would have worship, and we would sing, and we would play our instruments, and we would preach. We would do things as a church family.
Yeah.
Not a lot, but enough that you felt a sense of belonging.
Was it not a lot because too much surveillance, or was it not a lot because the church was just Laodicean?
No, because transportation is an issue in
yeah.
Cuba, and so you usually only went to church when you had to, and people had to walk miles or get a ride, catch a ride, or get on the bus or whatever. So it wasn't like you could go to church 3 or 4 times a week like some churches have programs and activities and things like that. So those were highlights to be able to congregate in church, because you felt a sense of belonging, a sense of community, which you didn't feel. One of the things that I remember as a 10-year-old, I thought in my little mind when I got here was, people in this country are so nice. Everybody smiles.
In
and
the US?
Yes. In Cuba, it was just almost like everybody's out to just survive. So if you ask for directions, if you ask for help, people weren't really very helpful.
A lot of suspicion.
That's correct.
I read this book, Escape from Camp 14. It was a guy that grew up in the camps in North Korea. And so a little different situation, but similar, dynamics between the government and the people. And he escaped. It's an amazing story. But to this day, he says he has difficulty with bonding. He sees people as, competition for food kind of thing, because that's how it was in the camps. Did you experience any of that, or was your family able to insulate you enough to where you actually kept your humanity?
I would say I was too young, but to that point, every community, every neighborhood in Cuba was organized into something called CDR, a Committee of Revolutionary Defense. Every block, every community had a director, an assistant director, and they had weekly or bi-weekly or bi-monthly meetings where everybody got together and discussed defending the revolution. And what that meant was that everybody was watching everybody else. So if you showed up at 3 o'clock in the morning, one night, the next morning, police would be knocking at your door saying, where were you last night? You came home. So there is
They
a
knew
system.
what you were doing.
That's right. And it's
Oh.
created to foster distrust.
Yeah.
So that if I go to you or to you and I say, let's overthrow the government, you're automatically going to turn me in because you don't know if I am a spy testing you.
Yeah.
And if I'm not, you can't afford to take that risk. So
Yeah.
you're going to turn me in
Wow.
because then you're off the hook.
Right.
So
Now-
you're right, to protect yourself.
Yes.
It's the opposite of what we call Christian fellowship, because everyone was policing everybody else.
Yeah.
Correct.
So there's no sense of safety anywhere.
No. And that is the objective, so that you feel lonely, so that you can't trust anybody.
Yeah.
So what would you say have been the ramifications for you? You were a young boy at that time, at a pretty sensitive and tender age. You're a grown man now. You've had a full and rich life. Looking back in hindsight, what would you say have been the ramifications of that life experience?
Well, for certain, it's taught me to appreciate the blessings that we have in this country. It's also made me realize more the challenges that we go through, because you know, for us to say this is a wonderful country and it's perfect, you know, we would be putting our heads in the sand. At the same time, when I look back at where I came from, of course, this is a place that has thousands more blessings and freedoms than where I came from. So it's made me very cognizant of our challenges here, so that I want to work towards help, you know, making that situation better, but as well as being thankful for what I have, because I would have never had it there. One of the things that I talk about with people that sometimes come to share how frustrated they are with some of the things that are going on here, I say, look, how many Cubans are daily getting on a raft, a man-made piece of wood, to try to come to this country, risking their lives across a shark-infested Gulf of Mexico? And how many people from this country do you see so
Are going to
desperate to
Cuba.
get out
Yes.
that they're willing to do the same thing to go to
So,
Cuba?
Good
Jamie, do you
perspective.
ever feel
Excellent
like
point.
rolling your eyes when you see Western self-pity, when people feel like it's just so bad here? That kind of attitude, do you ever just like...
Yes and no, because that is their reality. That's all they've ever known. And one of the reasons I challenge young people to go on mission trips is because when they go to another country, like Haiti, like Central America, like wherever, you're going to be awakened to how good you have it
What
here.
it's really
And then
hard.
you're bound to say, you know what? Okay, we have challenges. Let's try to work to fix them instead of, oh, I don't have enough money to buy the brand new iPhone X that's $1,100, or
Yeah.
you know, those are our problems. You know what I
Third
mean?
world
They're not
or
real
first world problems.
Right.
Exactly right. My nail just broke, and I have a performance, and I need to go have a mani-pedi before it. You know.
So I want to get into, during the second half of this program, I want to get into how your experience has affected your philosophy, and maybe even touch a little on your kind of your inclinations politically and where they come from. But since we're counselors, I would like to open this up to you guys and ask you, if you were working with a client that had been through a political dictatorship and regimented and repressed the way he's describing, but without the insulation of a good family, what would you do with that person to help them? Or the guy that I described from Escape from Camp 14, who's having difficulty bonding because he grew up in a dog-eat-dog world, and his limbic system is hyper aroused and he's always in survival mode because of it. What do you do with those people to help them recover?
For me, I would immediately go to my specialty with equine assisted therapy because we're taking the focus off of I can't trust human beings because they've done terrible things, but I can go into God's nature and I can be with this beautiful, amazing, majestic animal that's not going to harm me because it's also a prey animal that's been preyed upon, and build from there and just
feel
work
free,
with that.
Jamie, to comment if you think these things would be effective, you know, because you've been there and we haven't.
You know, for me, one thing that I would attempt to do is to, and it was a question that I was going to have for you, is to try to get to where their source of pain is, because there must be a lot, you know, there must have been a lot of pain because of that experience, and then trying to help them to heal from that pain. You know, the pain.
Because don't we want, like, the government to care about us, sort of, you know, or
Yeah.
at least be out for the common good, you know? And then when you sense that they're really not, I mean, even though they say they are, but you got to at some point realize, no, it would be painful.
Yeah,
I would think.
Yeah, and then, you know, like a question I wanted to ask you was, did you ever question your faith as a
I
Christian?
only question it here in this country.
Oh, okay. So,
When I had
okay,
luxury and comfort and opportunity and freedom and all of that.
Okay.
I didn't question it over there.
and
Curious
so,
about that.
And
Yeah.
so, what did you do, or what was your experience that kept you from questioning your faith? Because most people, when they go through something as traumatic, they begin to question God.
Or they go to the other place, which it sounds like where you went, when you
Okay.
clung to God,
That's
because
right.
Yeah.
God was your
Yeah.
saving grace.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what happened in your life that brought you to that place, that, you know, that helped you to just cling to God? Because I think that's something that's very important for us.
Well, in Cuba, I clung to Jesus.
Okay.
Here, I started studying
Well, how old?
when I started college, because I went to a college or a university unlike anything I'd ever been to. I went to Loyola University of Chicago. And so it was a totally different experience. I had gone to small Christian schools with 100 kids, this and that. I go to Loyola with thousands of kids.
And a faith that's different.
It's Catholic, right?
Yep. But there was everything there, you know, and nothing.
Yeah.
And then I went to the parties, and I saw
How
how
old?
people, I was 17.
So you came to the United States when? How old?
At 10.
At 10, and then by the time and you went through Adventist schools until 17?
Until
Small private schools.
16, and then I
Okay.
went to a Christian school, and I graduated there,
And then-
high school.
Finally, you're in Loyola University, and it's wild.
And it's just different
Different.
than anything I'd ever seen. So I said, let me check this out, because these people seem to be having a lot of fun.
So there was no partying and that kind of thing in Cuba?
Not at my age.
Yeah.
In Cuba, what has happened, and that paper describes it perfectly,
Yeah.
is the breakdown of everything.
Yeah.
Social fiber, moral fiber,
Yeah.
forget about economic fiber. Then people resort to what? Drinking
Yeah.
and sleeping around and doing whatever, because you want to have a little bit of fun to offset that pain, because you're not going to find gratitude, you're not going to find joy, you're not going to find anything.
Does the government attempt to regulate people morally? Like, does it try to keep adultery from happening or anything?
Not
like
at
that?
all.
Doesn't care about that kind of stuff?
I think they encourage
Encourage it, really?
anything goes.
No, okay. So you saw kind of people quietly behind the scenes just engaging in these demoralizing behaviors to try to cope with the pain and stress that they're under.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm seeing that obviously as I get older now, and as I go back to Cuba a couple of times a year, and I see a different perspective than a 10-year-old. Obviously, I wasn't seeing that as a 10-year-old. I see it now as I'm walking the streets,
Yeah.
and I'm talking with people, and I'm seeing what they're doing.
What got you past the party, you know, the enchantment?
Yep, it was actually
broke the
very
spell?
simple. That I realized that at the end of the night, when you went home at 2, 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, you were exhausted.
Yeah.
You were hungover.
Well, and I bet it affected your violin playing.
I couldn't play.
Alcohol doesn't
Play-
really
no,
help
exactly.
anybody with their
But I
skill.
just thought, I just wasted all this time, energy, and money, and what have I got for it? Nothing. So realize very quickly that it's a mechanism to drown out pain or to kill time or whatever. And I said, you know what?
Yeah.
I don't have time for
Because
that.
one thing I noticed about you is you're a little bit of a hard worker.
A little bit.
I don't think you're ever home for any weekend ever in your whole life.
No.
You
but
play constantly. I don't know anybody that does more concerts than you. No musician that I know concertizes more than you do.
I know one.
You do? Who?
Yeah, his name is Herman Harp.
Okay.
And he's not doing it anymore, but he used to do about 250 concerts. He was my mentor.
Was he? I guess. Well, he
He's the
rubbed
one
off
that
on
showed
you.
me
That's
the
why.
But
Showed you the way.
is that the fruit of this world that you grew up in with no options? And was it just like an explosion of look at all the options and you just threw yourself into it? Do you think that there's a connection there between?
Most certainly.
Yeah.
But I also love what I do, and I have a sense that calling. I left medical school to do this. So
So Loyola was medical school.
college, and then
Oh.
University of
Oh, okay.
Illinois was medical school.
Okay. Okay.
But we only have a certain amount of time on this earth, and so
Yeah.
we might as well make it count.
Yeah.
Amen.
And so I have a passion for what I do, which is using music to preach the gospel.
Yeah.
And I need to balance that with my personal life, my time with my wife, who's a very good friend of yours, who I love, and I love to spend time with her, and I want to be with her.
Do you spend time? I mean, can you
Yes,
come
I
home
do.
and you do have time?
Yes, we have parameters. We
You know,
have
I'm a
date
counselor, and
nights.
I'm always thinking,
Yes.
how's that marriage doing?
Date nights? Praise the
Yeah.
Lord.
Yes,
So,
For you.
so you use music as an instrument of healing.
that's right.
And I have a question. Music, as you was engaging in music, how did it heal you? Because there,
Oh, it was my escape.
Okay,
man.
there you
That's a
go.
great question.
there you go.
It became my own world, because in it I could play Beethoven and Bach and Tchaikovsky or other pieces that were not allowed under a communist, regime.
And bring healing to
Yeah, and that
Wow,
became
it's powerful.
an
That's your
outlet for me.
space.
for
Yes,
sure.
beautiful.
Have you guys all been to one of his concerts?
Absolutely. I always say, Jaime, that you make love to your violin. It's
Absolutely.
awesome.
You
It's
know, and
awesome
I'm
to
just
see
always amazed that the violin is still in one piece at the end of the concert. It's really amazing. Well, we're going to talk more in the second half about how growing up under a dictatorship, a communist dictatorship, has affected you philosophically, how you approach life. A little bit on your views on politics. We don't want to get too political because it's a religious station, but I want to touch on that because I follow you on Twitter, and I kind of have a feel for where you're at, and I want to discuss that. I also want to find out a little more about how you came around out of that party mentality. So be with us in the second half of our, what is the name of this, Dictatorship and Mental
Mental
Health.
health.
We'll find out just how crazy Jaime Jorge really is, but we love him and he's blessed us already. Please come
Amen.
with us for the
Yeah.
second half.
Yeah.